Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
Pint Glass Football. I'm your host, Brad Fowler. What's up, PGF Nation? The NFL draft is over, but we still have some more team draft grades to finish up. And today, it's the NFC West and the AFC West. We'll tell you the picks that we liked and didn't like for each team in these divisions. And, of course, we're going to grade each one of them. Joining me, like always, though, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what is going on?
The moment we've all been waiting for. This is going to be an interesting show because I don't think a lot of people are going to like what I have to say.
Uh-oh, here we go. I'm going to tell you right now, there's at least a team or two in here that I think had a really good class. And I know there's a couple, like Alex just mentioned there, that didn't do so well. So it's going to be fun to kind of go over these teams, who hit home runs and who struck out here. Let's start with the Denver Broncos, Alex, in the AFC West. I had written down biggest needs for this team entering the draft. Of course, quarterback, corner, and edge defender I thought were at the top of the list for them. Well, they addressed the quarterback position, as we know, right away at the 12th overall pick. They took quarterback Bo Nix out of Oregon, a guy that we haven't gotten to talk a whole lot about here leading up to the draft. But this is a guy who put up massive numbers at Oregon. But look, he played in a very, very quarterback-friendly offense. An offense in which he didn't really have to get through his progressions. It was a lot of one-read looks and a lot of easy underneath throws. So I'm not trying to take anything away from him. They just had things set up for Bo Nix to succeed. He also played behind a stellar offensive line and, quite frankly, just played on a team loaded with talent. We saw how many guys just got drafted off this roster. If I want to point out some of the good things about Bo Nix, he does get the ball out quickly. He's a very accurate quarterback. He mostly plays inside and within the system. He throws on time. He's very good passing in the short and intermediate routes, very accurate. He has a decent arm. I wouldn't say a great arm, but decent arm strength, but isn't the most accurate guy downfield. I'd say that's somewhere he struggles a little bit with accuracy down the field. He does have the arm strength to get it down there, but doesn't always hit on those deeper routes. But look, on paper, this pick, Alex, to me, it makes a lot of sense. They had to get a quarterback. And Nix really does fit what Sean Payton likes to do in the passing game. He needs a guy who is a rhythm and timing-based thrower who plays on schedule, and Nix is the guy who fits that need perfectly. He also, like I mentioned, is good in the short and intermediate stuff. That's a lot of what Sean Payton's offense likes to expose. It's really the exact reason why Russell Wilson didn't work in Denver, because he's a guy who likes to play off script. Well, that's not Bo Nix. So I see why they liked him. I see why it fits. Now, I had a second round grade on Nix. So a lot of people are going to look at this pick and be like, look, they reached. I get it. But they didn't have a second round pick. And with all those quarterbacks going off the board before they got to pick, it kind of felt like they had to pull the trigger here, or they were going to go another year without being able to compete. And I just don't think they could risk passing up on him at 12. My comp for this guy, Alex, is Kirk Cousins. The best version of Bo Nix, so to speak, in the NFL, I think, is a guy similar to Kirk Cousins. He's a guy that needs the right system and a lot of talent around him, but he's a good leader. He has a lot of experience. And like I said, he does have some traits that are going to translate. So I think this is a good fit on paper. I think he could be a successful quarterback at the next level.
Yeah, Brad, I was not high on Bo Nix at all. I completely agree with you, second round grade. Now, there comes the thing that we always talk about with the quarterback tax, meaning just because there's a second round grade, you're a quarterback, you get boosted up. If there's a trade in place during the draft, it costs more if you're moving up for a quarterback. It's the quarterback tax all the way around. I do understand the fit that a lot of people see, but I still don't like it. I don't think it's going to work. I think at some point we need to simply have a quarterback. You know, you guys can look at us on YouTube or even on the podcast, where we just simply talk about these quarterbacks and what it looks like and how we think each one of these guys are going to do, because he is one of the guys I think is going to be very mid or even below mid in terms of what he's going to put out into the atmosphere. Now, I do believe he's going to be better than JJ McCarthy, but we'll save that for another pod. But again, I think to what people believe in Sean Payton, he perhaps can help this guy succeed in this league.
Like I mentioned, Alex, they didn't have a second round pick. So in the third round, they took edge defender Jonah Ellis out of Utah. This was another position they needed to address. This is a guy who had 12 sacks last season with 39 quarterback pressures. A little bit undersized, but he plays tough. He is a tough physical defender, really physical, never takes a play off. And look, his dad is a former first-round pick who went on to make 2 Pro Bowls and played 10 years in the NFL. His son has an explosive first step, an array of pass rush moves, a very developed prospect. I think this was a great value pick here in the third round for Denver.
Yeah, I can actually agree with that. I was trying to search for where I might have gone here, but in their 3-4 lineup, they did need some burst. They needed some juice, and Jonah Ellis was the right pick here.
In the fourth round, at the 102nd pick, they took wide receiver Troy Franklin out of Oregon. This is a guy that I had a second round grade on, Franklin, and I think his showing at the combine kind of hurt his stock in the pre-draft process. Now, he improved on some drills at his Oregon Pro Day, but this is great value here in the fourth round. I did not think he would fall this far. Another player that I got to see play up close, versatile player, excels on the outside in the slot. I love the versatility. He's an explosive player in the open field, dominates man coverage. He really knows how to get open and is great at high pointing the football. Of course, he's a former teammate of Bo Nix. So I think this pick from a chemistry standpoint, from a fit standpoint, is just a home run.
Yeah, absolutely. We know Cameron Sutton is kind of on the back end of his career. Tim Patrick, we know, coming off of back-to-back knee surgeries, so he is an unknown at this point. They traded Jerry Jeudy, so they needed to get this guy some weapons. What better weapon to get than a guy that the quarterback, is familiar with and how to move forward? Because right now, one of their outside wide receivers is set to be Josh Reynolds. I think Troy Franklin can come in and actually win that job. And Marvin Mims, we saw a lot of him flashing last year. So there are some weapons, and you're starting to see this formulate around for a young quarterback.
Now, they had 2 fifth-round picks, pick 145, and just a couple picks later, 147. They took cornerback Chris Abrams-Drain out of Missouri, and then also took Audric Estime, the running back out of Notre Dame. Now, both guys, I think, offer depth at their positions at this point in the draft. Chris Abrams-Drain makes big plays, but when you watch his tape, he does take a lot of risks, and because of that, he gets beat sometimes. So, good player. I don't like how much he rolls the dice in coverage, but he is a guy that's going to be able to take the ball away and make the occasional splashy play. Audric Estime, to me, he looked like a guy going into this draft process that might be a third-round pick until he tested really poorly at the combine. His draft stock really took a hit after that, but he's a physical runner, a downhill runner. I think he could be a good short yardage guy for them and maybe a solid backup running back. Overall, though, Alex, I think going back with Bo Nix at the start of this draft, I think it was a reach at 12, granted. But once again, I get the move. They had to get a quarterback. He fits with Sean Payton's system. So I don't hate that pick, even though I'm not super high on Bo Nix as a player. I think this was a good landing spot for him. But I like that they found great value in the third and fourth round. I think those picks really add something to this class. Not a lot of picks for Denver, but I think they did a nice job addressing needs and finding value. So for me, this is a B grade.
Yeah, I can agree there. Actually, I'm going to go with a B minus, so we're not too far off. Maybe perhaps in the fifth round, with Kalen Carson available, I probably would have gone in a different direction at cornerback. And then at some point, I think I would have also addressed safety. We know they also cut probably, if not the best safety in the league, in Justin Simmons. So the back end is kind of scarce. I know they brought in Brandon Jones, but perhaps I probably would have looked at bringing in another young safety. But again, still, we're close in there. A B minus, that's where I'm at with them. Brad, on to the Super Bowl winning Chiefs once again, back-to-back Super Bowl champs. It seems no matter what they do, and probably no matter even what we say today, we're going to be wrong. But Nonetheless, let's start. With their first round pick, they traded up in the draft to the 28th pick, once again with the Bills. We know what happens the last time the Bills and Chiefs traded. You're welcome, Patrick Mahomes. But they took Xavier Worthy. Now, Xavier Worthy is a player that neither of us were high on. We do like the measurables and, some of the analytics around it, but the tape is not good tape. He cannot break down in routes. He's slipping all over the field, and he's a consistent dropper of the ball, which is something that I know Patrick Mahomes dealt with early in the year. But once again, this guy is not an elite receiver. He is really simply just going to be taking over what Scantling was doing. He's not going to be able to do a lot of the things and get multiple the way Andy Reid likes to get. But he's just the person I don't think I would have traded up for at this point. So this pick really is confusing to me a little bit.
Yeah, I completely agree, Alex. I'm not a big fan of Xavier Worthy. I feel like he's just a home run guy, not a complete player. You hit on it, drops too many balls, struggles against physical press man coverage because of his size, very small, undersized player. I don't like this pick at all. I think if it wasn't for that 40 time, we wouldn't even be talking about him in the first round.
And then coming back in the second round, I do like what they did in the second round with Kingsley Su'Ma'atiya from BYU, offensive tackle. We know what type of issues were happening with Donovan Smith and specifically Jawan Taylor early on in the year, but they did settle down. But I think this is a great pickup by them. This is a guy that I think is going to definitely push Y.A. Morris, who is currently penciled in as the starter for Kansas City, but I think he's going to be able to push and start right away out the gate game one.
Yeah, this is a great pick at 63rd overall. Just a mountain of a man at offensive tackle who's a really good athlete, still developing a little bit, but this is a former 5-star recruit, and it shows on tape because of those traits.
They had 2 fourth-round picks in Jared Wiley, Jaden Hicks, and then they went on to add a lot of depth with in the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds. But you know what, Brad? The reason I ran through that, and I'll let you respond, but I just wasn't excited about anything they did the rest of the draft. I just thought it was ho-hum, did not feel right as I was going through the evaluations and what they did. I just felt there were a lot of other places they could have gone with a lot of these picks. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the back half of their draft?
So I kind of like the middle of this draft here. Jared Wiley at tight end. Look, we know Kelsey is getting a little bit older. Probably time to start thinking about his replacement. I think they did that with Jared Wiley. He was a productive player at TCU, had 8 touchdown passes last season. Jaden Hicks is actually one of my favorite mid-round players, a guy that we haven't got to talk about on this podcast yet. Super versatile player. He's going to be a chess piece for Spagnuolo to really move around in this defense and line him up in all kinds of different matchups. He's a little bit better against the run than he is in coverage, but a really, really good player. And I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be an impact guy right out of the gates. Now, 5, 6, 7 round, I think mostly just taking flyers on guys. But I think the second pick there that we talked about, the tackle out of BYU, and their 2 fourth-round picks, I think those were really solid players.
In terms of what I was looking at, I thought in one of the fourth round picks, they could have taken Braden Allen. I think they're real stiff and short on the back end with that running back crew. I thought Braden Allen coming in there to couple with what you have in Isaiah Pacheco, I thought that would have been a nice 1-2 punch, and then you balance it out with a scat back or somebody that can come out on third downs. I thought they could have strengthened that a little bit more while they deal with a lot what they're doing with those young wide receivers to help them a little bit more. But nonetheless, we have seen time and time again, Brett Veach and Andy Reid obviously know more than us for the most part because they hit and they make it work. But for me, a grade for them is going to be a C+, borderline B-. I just wasn't excited about this draft.
I completely agree with the grade. My initial thought was B-, maybe C+. I think the only reason I'm okay bumping it to a B- is because of how much I like the tackle out of BYU. I think he's a really good player and a really good value pick in the second round. And then, like I mentioned, I think Jaden Hicks was a really under the radar pick. And Jared Wiley, I think, is a pretty decent player, productive player at the tight end spot. I think those picks really saved this from being potentially a bad grade. All right, how about the LA Chargers, Alex? Entering this draft, positions of need that I circled for them were offensive tackle, wide receiver, and defensive tackle. First pick, fifth overall, they take tackle Joe Alt out of Notre Dame, the best tackle in a loaded tackle class. I'm not going to break down his game right here because we've done that on prior episodes. So if you want to hear more in depth about his play, go back and listen if you want to hear about that. But look, this is a great player at number 5. The only question I have is his ability to be able to move to right tackle from left tackle, because we know Rashawn Slater is an all-pro left tackle for the Chargers, so they're not going to move him. So that might be the only question mark here. But look, Joe Alt was a former tight end who moved to offensive line. So he's a good athlete, and I think he has what it takes to make the switch.
Yeah, absolutely. Did not have the greatest combine, but who cares? The tape says it all. I mean, this is a typical Jim Harbaugh pick. Not surprised. Day one starter, 10-year starter. You can pencil. Actually, you could write it in pen for what the Chargers did with that first pick.
Yeah, and I love their second pick here in the second round, pick 34. They took wide receiver Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. This is why I liked them taking Alt in the first round. There was a lot of mock drafts and a lot of people, myself included, that thought they might go wide receiver with the 5th overall pick because they would have had their choice of some really good players. But they knew that this was a deep wide receiver class and there was going to be some really good ones available in the second round. So getting the best tackle with the first pick, now you go get Ladd McConkey in the second round. McConkey is the best route runner in this class. Razor sharp, really smooth in and out of his breaks. He's a versatile player. In college, he played on the outside. He played on the inside. I think he'll probably play a little more inside at the NFL level. But like I said, he's shown the ability to play both, has really good top end speed, can pull away on vertical routes, and he's quick and can separate underneath as well. A guy who's great after the catch. He had almost identical size and combine numbers as Garrett Wilson, as we know, a guy that got drafted by the Jets a couple years ago, and we've seen what type of player he has become. So to me, this is just another great pick.
Yeah, I'm not mad at the Ladd McConkey pick. We know they let Mike Williams go. We know they let Keenan Allen go, so they needed to truly look at this position. Ladd McConkey, a guy that can get multiple insets. He's not necessarily an X, but I believe he could play the Y and the Z for the most part. So I do like what they did here, and especially when you have a quarterback of the level of Justin Herbert, you're hoping that you can get a guy that's going to be able to get open and get open quickly. It is going to be interesting to see what type of offense that Jim Harbaugh and team have put together, because this is not going to be going down the field as much as we saw in the previous regime with Justin Herbert.
Absolutely, Alex. I think you're right. It's going to be really interesting here with this new regime, because when Jim Harbaugh took over, we also knew he was probably going to take one of these Michigan guys, and he ended up taking one in the 3rd round with the 69th overall pick, linebacker Junior Colson. Great tackler. I mean, this guy really finishes. I had a 3rd round grade on him. I don't think this is a reach at all just because he's a Michigan guy. I think this is about where he should have gone. He's a really good player, impressive coverage skills as well, strong run defense. This is just a very complete linebacker, and I think it's a good pick as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're going to be running more of a 3-4, perhaps hybrid 4-3, but more of a 3-4. And I think with Junior Colson, a guy that knows the defense that they're going to try and run, that can help everybody. And the draft pick from the interior that they had last year, Darian Henley, I think they're going to make a really good interior linebacking core that's going to be able to do some damage fast, smart, and move with bad intentions.
In the 4th round, they addressed the defensive line with Justin Igbe out of Alabama with the 105th pick. He's got some real nice pass rush upside, athletic guy. He had a career high in sacks and quarterback pressures in 2023. So I think this is a guy that's going to be able to be an impact guy, maybe not a day one starter, but definitely an impact player there in the 4th round. Now, they had 2 5th-round picks, and they took 2 cornerbacks. First, they took Tarheeb Still out of Maryland, and then After that, a few picks later, they took cornerback Cam Hart out of Notre Dame. Now, still is a physical cornerback. He's a guy who's versatile, can play outside. He can line up in the nickel on the inside. He had 5 interceptions last year. He's got ball skills. Hart is a guy who didn't give up any touchdowns last season on over 308 coverage snaps. So a guy who can really cover, really good athlete. I think both these corners in the 5th round offer a ton of value.
And I think in the rounds like these, this is when you get a guy like Jim Harbaugh, similar to Pete Carroll, where he came in and did a lot of his damage in the middle and late rounds, picking up those guys that he was familiar with, that some of his staff was familiar with, and that he had seen with his own eyes and been able to scout in real time, knowing a lot of things that we may not have seen because we haven't watched them on a day in and day out basis or played against a lot of these players. This is where he is truly going to do a lot of his damage over the next 2, including this draft, 2 to 3 drafts, because he knows a lot of these players that are coming out.
Yeah, it's a great point, Alex, because it continues in the 6th round with the 181st pick. They took running back Kamani Vidal out of Troy. This is a guy who made my list of best sleepers article. Once again, guys, shameless plug here, but if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, go to pintglassfootball.com, subscribe to the free newsletter. We put out articles like this fairly regularly. Like I said, one of my sleepers. I really, really like this kid in the 6th round. 14 touchdowns last year. He has elite agility. He can make guys miss. He forced 94 missed tackles last year. So really good player in that late in the draft. And then in the 7th round, Alex, a guy that we've talked about on the YouTube channel, wide receiver Brendan Rice out of USC, easily one of the biggest steals in this entire draft. We had a 3rd round grade on this guy. Great player, reliable hands, sharp route runner, a player who shows up big in big moments. I can't believe he fell this far. This is just another home run. Alex, I don't know how else to put it. This is an absolute home run draft for the LA Chargers. They crushed it. Not a single pick that I don't like here. They found value in the 1st round all the way to the 7th round, and they addressed a lot of needs while doing so. This is an A+ off the boards draft.
Yeah, I'm going to actually have to agree with you here, specifically when you get to that 7th round. This team, what's the number one thing? We just talked about it earlier. This team really, truly got rid of all of their weapons, the tight end and both starting wide receivers. Neither of us, even if you go back to last year, were a believer in Quentin Johnson. You needed to get some other receivers in there. They didn't really go into the free agency pool. They did bring in DJ Chark, but to get Brendan Rice, as well as a familiar player that is going to be familiar to Jim Harbaugh and the offense, and Cornelius Johnson, that are great value adds at the end of the draft, especially Brendan Rice, who I think can either push Quentin Johnson or Joshua Palmer, who are both penciled in, with the emphasis on penciled in as the starters. And who knows, Cornelius Johnson, who's probably going to be more familiar with the offense, can push past DJ Chark and maybe find himself a more credible role in the offense out the gate. So I actually can agree, even though they are the rivals of my most beloved Raiders, I can begrudgingly give them an A+ as well. As previously spoken about, my beloved Raiders, everybody have a seat. We're going to have a long talk about what just happened with the Raiders. 1st round, pick number 13. We're all aware of what happened at pick number 8. Everybody was probably another one of the worst kept secrets that the Raiders wanted Michael Penix, but instead he was taken ahead, and they perhaps caught a little bit off guard, as a lot of us were. But with the 13th pick, they picked the best tight end in the draft, one of the guys that, Brad, you spoke about that had the best hands in the draft, but they picked him at 13th. My issue here is he was picked as a luxury pick. Now, he was the BPA best pick available. However, we are not the Kansas City Chiefs, the 49ers, the Ravens, or anything like that. So this was a pick of luxury, specifically the fact that you drafted Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, the best tight end in the draft last year, and was barely used given to what the debacle that happened at coaching. However, to turn around and take this guy, take Brock Bowers. Again, this is not about the player. This is more about the pick and the fit. To take him in a situation where you probably could have used more draft picks. We have heard from several pundits that they were trying to move up because a lot of teams wanted this player. Specifically, we know for a fact the Rams were trying to move up to trade for him. And I believe the Colts was another team that we heard as a fact that they were trying to move up, that they did not take advantage, shows me that this GM is still the same GM that was in with the Chargers, and he will not move up and down to make the best choice for the team. There was no way you should have picked this player. You should have definitely traded out, traded down, and perhaps how about you were doubling down on defense when you got Christian Wilkins. How about trading down, perhaps either with the Rams or Indiana, and picking up Quinyon Mitchell? This is bad news for the Raiders. Again, not about the player, but about the pick and the fit. I specifically did not like this pick.
Look, I love Brock Bowers, and I think you do too, and you made that point. Great player, probably a top 5-7 player in this draft. I understand the value, not thinking he's going to be there at 13. I also understand that all those quarterbacks went ahead of you, but at that point, trading back probably would have been the right move in getting more value. So I totally agree with you there. If they had an opportunity and they passed on it to possibly trade back and get more picks, that probably would have been the smarter move.
Into the second round, they came and they got a guy that we all kind of had mocked going to Dallas at that center position with Jackson Powers Johnson, the best center in the draft. I love this pick. We needed to improve the offensive line. We have ignored it too long, but getting this guy in the second round, great value. We already have Andrew James there, so Jackson Powers is going to be a starting guard going into the season, and a guy that can get multiple and switch on to center if necessary. And I love this pick and building the trenches. Great pick, great value.
Yeah, there's just no way that I think anybody thought he'd be available at pick 44. I think most people, like you said, thought he would be a top 25 pick in this draft. Really, really good player. A player that we've talked about is one of the biggest steals in this entire draft. A plug-and-play starter, instantly upgrades the offensive line. Just pencil him in. This guy's going to make Pro Bowls. He'll probably even make some All-Pros by the time he's done.
But as we give praise, we get to the third round. And with the third round, 13th overall pick, they picked Delmar Glaze out of Maryland. Big guy, has a little bit of mobility, but the tape is not that impressive that warranted to be picking a guy in the third round. Specifically, when you had Matt Goncalves out of Pittsburgh there, you still needed another receiver. Roman Wilson was there. There's been talk about the running back position. Blake Corum was there, and we still have yet to really shore up middle linebacker. Oh, by the way, Peyton Wilson was there, who's all picked in the third round. I just think they bumbled this pick, and they didn't get the value that was available there at that third round pick.
Yeah, nothing against Delmar Glaze, but I hate this pick too, Alex, for the point that you made. This is a big reach. I don't think anybody had a third-round grade on this guy, and with all the good players that you mentioned that were on the board, I'm sure there's a few more that we can mention as well. There was a lot of talent in that third round available. To go with a guy that, quite frankly, probably shouldn't have been drafted that high. This is a big swing and a miss for the Raiders.
And to continue on with the theme, coming back in the fourth round, getting DeCamarion Richardson out of Mississippi State. Once again, the player probably can develop into something, but we're simply talking about value here. In a situation where the back end of that defense needed some help, it needed a pop. Last year, I was very vocal about wanting to draft Christian Gonzalez. They did not. But here you had an opportunity to get some of the best value in the draft. TJ Tampa was still available. And this is a guy that was in certain mock drafts going in the first, but definitely had a full-on second round grade, still available in the fourth round. You skip over him to go and get DeCamarion Richardson, who is not a solid cornerback in this league, just based upon what he put on tape at Mississippi State. And you cannot pass on the value that is TJ Tampa. And oh, by the way, he fell to the Ravens, and we know what he's going to turn into over there. So once again, not paying attention to the board, not realizing the value that was fully there at the fourth round pick.
Not a whole lot I can add there, Alex, but once again, a guy that I felt like they really reached on. not a player that I had a fourth round grade on. Way better players still on the board and at that position. So once again, third and fourth round, where there was so many good players here, these are just two big misses on paper.
Right. But I can say they did rebound with the 5th, 6th, and 7th pick. They had 2 7th-round picks, but I'll speak about the first 3. Tommy Eichenberg out of Ohio State has a Robert Spillane body build and probably similar type career. Dylan Laub, one of my sleeper picks in terms of running back. I love this kid. I love his size. I love what he can possibly add to the offense. And then Trey Taylor in the 7th round. What this guy can bring to a team, he was active. That's the word I'll use for him. He was just active. We're all going to talk about, oh, well, it was Air Force. But in the 7th round, I think this was the best value pick on the back half of this draft.
Yeah, Alex, Eichenberg, the linebacker out of Ohio State, really solid pick there. I like the running back you mentioned out of New Hampshire. Trey Taylor, a guy that you're really high on. But I'll tell you what, you didn't mention MJ Devonshire, the cornerback out of Pittsburgh. This, to me, it's rare that a guy in the 7th round gets me this excited. I think this is a steal. When the Raiders took him, I even texted you, I think they just got a steal with Devonshire in the 7th round, because I think he had a way higher grade than this. I would have thought he would have been long gone by the time the 7th round rolled around. So I think that's a great value pick and a guy that can probably not only make this roster, but maybe even be an early impact guy.
So all in all, given what we just spoke about and how they picked up towards the back end of the draft, because I really originally had this team with a D, I bumped them up based on those last 4 picks, as you just so eloquently spoke about, that I moved them up to a C in terms of this draft. That first round and the 3rd and 4th rounds was just, you couldn't miss the type of value that they missed. I cannot give them a higher grade than a C.
Yeah, I won't disagree with it, Alex. They really recovered in the back half of this draft. And, of course, we love the Jackson Powers Johnson pick. But, yeah, those glaring misses in the middle of this draft really hurt the grade. Did you know that Pint Glass Football is more than just this podcast? We have an exclusive newsletter. Sign up for free at pintglassfootball.com to receive articles and insights delivered straight to your inbox. But wait, there's more. We're excited to announce our brand new YouTube channel. Not only can you listen to our podcast on YouTube, but you'll also find exclusive video content waiting for you. So hit the pause button right now and go subscribe to our newsletter, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube to stay connected with the latest football news and our exclusive content. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. I personally love the pick'em game. Just pick between 2 and 5 players to build a pick'em entry. Pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Download the Underdog Fantasy app and sign up today with promo code PGF. That's promo code PGF to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. The official ticketing app of Pint Glass Football is now SeatGeek. I can't recommend them enough, guys. I've been using SeatGeek for years. You want to go to a game this season? SeatGeek is here to take the confusion out of buying tickets, making sure you get the best seats at the best prices. With SeatGeek, you'll never have to worry about overpaying for tickets again. How? They put a 0 to 10 score on each ticket, so you know you're getting a good deal. But here's the real game changer. You can get $20 off your first ticket purchase with the code PGFPOD. That's right, $20 off with code PGFPOD. This season, make every game day epic with SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app and remember to enter the code PGFPOD to grab your $20 discount. All right, let's shift gears to the NFC West. Let's start with the 49ers, defending NFC champs. Biggest needs entering the draft for me, I had circled offensive tackle, cornerback, and wide receiver. Well, they addressed wide receiver in the first round. 31st overall pick, they took Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. I think right away they addressed one of their biggest needs. Trade rumors are really out about Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel right now. So addressing receiver early, I think, makes a lot of sense. They get a slot receiver in Pearsall. He climbed draft boards during the pre-draft process. Productive player, has great hands, and I think he's going to be a factor as a run blocker as well. I know that is something that Shanahan really loves his receivers to be able to run block. Here's my only knock on this pick. And look, I like Ricky Pearsall a lot. I think there were better players available at the end of the first round. I had a kind of early to mid second round grade on him. So I don't hate the pick late in the first here. I just think there was still some pretty good players there that I had ranked higher than Pearsall. But I do think it fits from a stylistic standpoint and what they need. I think it really fits what Shanahan and this offense is looking for.
I like this pick a lot, and I think it's a sleeper pick, but I can completely agree in terms of the value here. But I think in terms of the fit was more important to Kyle and team here than the actual value, of what we might have thought as a whole. The fit is this kid can get multiple. You're going to be able to put him at the X, Y, or the Z at any point in time. And again, I'll start to just give myself 2 pats on the back because I call this during last year's offseason when I said San Francisco is going to have to make some tough decisions because everybody's going to want to get paid. And this tells me, tea leaves on the ground, that we perhaps may be we might be looking at a crystal ball here and seeing before this season starts, and I'll specifically say the name Deebo Samuel. I don't think it's going to be Ayuk. We could be looking at Deebo Samuel in another uniform to start of the 2024 season.
Yeah, Alex, I agree. And I think that pick makes even more sense because of that. Now, in the second round with the 64th overall pick, they took cornerback Renardo Green out of Florida State. He had a breakout season at Florida State last year. He's really good in press man coverage, 13 pass breakups, 1 interception last year. He's an explosive athlete, strong open field tackler. Once again, I really like that they addressed a need for this team. But for me, this was a little bit of a reach here in the second round. I thought he was a third round pick at best. So don't hate the player, just not a fan of where they took him.
I thought about that until I realized, well, they're at the back end of the draft. So that's really, for lack of a better, that's really the first pick in the third round. So I'm not going to ding them too hard for that because technically that's a third round pick, right? For the most part, pick number 32 in the second round. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt there. They did need to pick up another cornerback. We saw when Hayufunga got hurt, but they needed to go and they needed to get somebody here. We knew that it was a tight draft for cornerbacks. Now you could say perhaps maybe they could have went with TJ Tampa here because perhaps he had a stronger grade, but I'm not going to ding them if we have a third round grade and they draft him at the back end of the second round.
In the third round, 82nd pick, they took tackle Dominic Pooney out of Kansas. I think he has the potential to move inside and be a starting guard. I mean, this guy is a beast in the run game, really physical, strong, tough kid, nasty attitude, started 27 games at Kansas. I think this was a solid pick in the third.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right about where they're going to play him because right now on the depth chart, he is the starting right guard. So solid pick, actually a really good pick, getting a guy great value in the third round. And as you are correct, he will be the starting right guard come opening season.
Fourth round, they addressed the safety position at 124 with Malik Mustafa out of Wake Forest. This guy is impressive in coverage, can really cover ground, can play in the box as well, because I think he's really impressive versus the run and in coverage, really complete safety. And I think an underrated player in this class, really nice value pick here in the fourth.
So here's where I have questions. Now, depending on what type of defense you're going to run, and let's just talk about this for a quick second here. So Malik Mustafa, depending on what you think, do you think he can be big nickel?
Yes. So I think he offers a lot of versatility. And I think that's what they see with him is that he can be a little bit of a chess piece that they can move around in the secondary.
Okay, cool. So if in that instance, then I can feel safe about this pick because once again, and what you will hear is a running theme here with TJ Tampa in this round it's always going to be hard for me to overlook them, especially when a team is looking at the defensive backfield and this guy is staring you in the face. But just based upon that, Brad, I'm not too mad at that pick.
3 fourth-round picks. They took running back Isaac Guerendo out of Louisville. This is a guy who was productive, averaged 6 yards per carry last season, big-time speed, ran the fastest 40-yard dash for all the running backs at the combine at 4.33, 11 touchdowns on the ground, 22 catches out of the backfield for 234 receiving yards, played wide receiver in high school. So this guy has great hands. He can run routes. Really one of the more underrated players in this draft. The 49ers actually traded picks number 173 and 176 just to move up and get this guy. I think this is a sleeper pick here in the 4th round.
Absolutely. We know what type of running backs and the type of scheme that they run with the Shanahans, I guess in this case, Kyle. But great size, Isaac Guerendo, 6 feet, 221 pounds. Going to be able to probably at some point in time, I'm sure he's going to get diabolical and put them both on the field, McCaffrey and Guerendo on the field at the same time. As you know, McCaffrey can easily flex out to be a wide receiver and put Isaac Guerendo in the backfield by himself and just completely throw defenses off. So I think this is a guy that going to ease up, take some of the load off McCaffrey and be successful in that offense.
So I mentioned they had 3 4th-round picks. So at 135, they took wide receiver Jacob Cowing out of Arizona. Another guy, big-time speed, another solid pick here, Alex. He's a sharp route runner, a guy who can find the end zone. He had 9 receiving touchdowns last season. Great run after the catch guy who's quick. He's elusive. Just a perfect fit in this 49ers offense.
Interesting pick. We've been talking about wide receivers, what they did in the first round, and here they come back and draft another wide receiver who specifically is going to be a slot, but they also signed Jawan Jennings. So again, look into the crystal ball. What is this telling you about the 49ers and what's going to happen this offseason or perhaps even in the middle of the season with the trade deadline? There is something brewing here in San Francisco, and they know it, and I'll say it again. Let's pay attention and watch because there's going to be some interesting movement going on in San Francisco.
In the 6th round, at pick 215, they took guard Jarrett Kingston out of USC. I only mention him because this is a really solid player who's great in pass protection. I think this is a good value in the 6th round, addressing the interior of the offensive line once again. Now, I don't like that they reached a little bit in the early rounds, but I understand the fit. But they did address positions of need throughout this draft. I also wasn't a huge fan of them not getting an offensive tackle because this year, we've talked about it, the class was deep. That, to me, was a mistake. I think somewhere in this draft, they needed to shuffle some picks, move up, and get a guy that they could move into as the future tackle for this team. But they really saved this from being a low grade by what they did in the mid rounds, because those middle to late rounds here, they hit on a lot of quality picks and a lot of guys, Alex, that I think fit really well with what they do in San Francisco. And typically those rounds are where GM John Lynch hits home runs. So with that track record, I think he did it again here. I'm going to give them a B grade. I don't think it's an absolute home run draft, but I think it's a really solid draft.
Yeah, solid draft. I'm actually going to give them a B plus. No issue here. The only thing I had, similar to what you said in the 7th round, I was really high on a lot of the Michigan guys. I wouldn't have minded them trying to maybe move up a spot or two and try and get Ladarius Henderson out of Michigan. Just based on the pedigree, I would have taken a shot there with the offensive tackle. Seattle Seahawks, with their 1st round pick, select Byron Murphy II out of Texas, defensive tackle. Here's my issue with the pick. I like the player, don't like the fit. With Mike McDonald coming over, Byron Murphy, who I believe is a rushing interior lineman, I don't think necessarily fits what Mike McDonald is going to do as a guy that's going to have to be a defensive end in a 3-4. I think he's better used in a 4-3 where he can rush the passer in this situation. So I'm not sure about the fit, but I like the player. So I'm a little bit confused just based upon where they're going defensively if this guy is going to work for them in their system.
Yeah, Byron Murphy here with pick 16. I think they're trying to kind of shore up the middle of that defense. This team struggled against the run last year, 31st in rushing yards allowed per game, 32nd in rushing first downs allowed. They had to get somebody in the middle who can be a disruptor. And in the interior, I think Murphy, even though he's a little bit better of a pass rusher than a run stuffer, a very good player that I think gives them some beef up front.
Coming back in the second round and taking guard Christian Haynes. I like this pick. Last year the Seahawks really truly hit on their tackles, and basically almost 1 through 7 they hit on every single player. But coming back and shoring up this offensive line, bringing in Christian Haynes, we know what they did last year in getting Zach Charbonnet, and we already have Kenneth Walker. Getting this guard is going to really show us what they're going to do. They're going to be tough, they're going to be physical, and they are definitely going to be running the ball, because I think this guy is a plug and play player and fits right exactly what this team wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's one of the best guards in this class. I think he is a guy that instantly improves the offensive line, and I think he's a day one starter. So this is a solid pick.
Coming back in the fourth round, they get Trice Knight out of UTEP linebacker, and as well as drafted tight end AJ Barner. Now, what I will say, I like the Knight pick. I think he's a guy that's going to be able to fit what Mike McDonald likes to do here. So I'm not too mad at that. The AJ Barner, I'm looking at him more as an inline blocker. Again, I said earlier with the Christian Haynes pick, they're going to get physical, and coming from what he was with the Ravens, Mike McDonald, looking at a guy like Nick Boyle, they get a guy in AJ Barner coming from Michigan, and there's a pedigree there. We'll just have to keep saying it because it is what it is. He'll be a great inline blocker for when they want to really beef up and run the ball.
Yeah, AJ Barner, I think he's a solid player. I don't know if I would have taken him in the fourth round, though. A guy who's really more of a blocker than a pass catcher. I understand they want to be physical and run the ball. I just think there was probably better players on the board there.
Yeah, I can agree there. And for the rest of the draft, Nehemiah Pritchett in the fifth round, Satoa Lamua in the sixth, DJ James and Michael Jarrett in the sixth. The only issue I had was really the fifth round pick of Pritchett. Not when a guy that we've been lauding and talking about, not with Muhammad Kamara there, the edge rush out of Colorado State. You're running a 3-4. Why not go out there and get your guy that can rush the passer from the outside, from the edge? You can put him out there. You know what he can do, and you can be successful setting this guy up for success. But the rest of the draft was really just about depth and filling out the depth chart.
Yeah, kind of interesting. It's not every day you see a team take two starting corners from the same team. They took both of Auburn's starting corners in the fifth and then sixth rounds. Pritchett, I actually don't think Pritchett's as good a player as DJ James is. So that's kind of interesting too. Regardless, this draft doesn't really get me that excited, Alex. I'm curious to hear your grade here. They had some solid picks, but nothing about it really wows me.
Right. Absolutely. And I talked about that 2022 draft. You got Tariq Woolen. Last year you drafted Devin Witherspoon, and you also drafted Kobe Bryant, all guys that you hit on. And like you said, to go and draft more cornerbacks, either Mike McDonald wants to do something different, doesn't think those guys can fit, but it still doesn't make sense given the production that those guys have put up in a short time. So with that being said, I'm going to give them a C+ because I thought they could have done a lot better the back half from the fourth round on in this draft.
All right, let's shift to the LA Rams. Biggest needs for me entering this draft. I think they needed to address the edge, cornerback, and the offensive line. Or right off the bat here in the first round with the 19th overall pick, they took edge defender Jared Verse out of Florida State, the most complete edge defender in this class. Power rusher, has one of the highest pass rush win rates in college football. We talked about him on the YouTube channel being one of the steals in the first round because he's a top 10 player in this class.
Yeah, and also a pat on my back, a guy that I actually got right mocking to the Rams. He's there now. They've reshaped this front. We know losing Aaron Donald, but you got Kobe Turner, you got Young, and now you also have Jared Verse. So you're reshaping your team with high draft picks, high impact college players, and players that'll fit your system.
Now, in the second round, they take interior defensive lineman Braden Fisk out of Florida State. They get Jared Verse's teammate in round 2, big time athlete. This guy put on a show at the combine, dominated almost every drill for the defensive lineman group. Fisk was also a very productive player at Florida State, had 11 and a half sacks when he lined up at the defensive tackle position over the past 2 seasons, which was the second most in college football. We know they lost Aaron Donald, and they really needed to add some beef up front. I think they nailed it with these 2 guys.
Great shot by the Rams having Jared Verse call Brian Fisk and tell him that he's getting drafted there. It'll be interesting to see what type of defense they run. They've been running more of a 3-4. Obviously, you can move Aaron Donald all around, but to see how all of these guys fit, because I've seen Jared Verse at linebacker at times. So I'm interested to see how they run going forward.
In the third round, 83rd pick, they took running back Blake Corum out of Michigan. Big time production from this guy, 27 touchdowns at Michigan last season. Physical, downhill runner, a little bit underrated as far as agility. He actually moves pretty well, good field vision. They needed running back depth. I think this is a solid pick in the third round.
Yeah, not mad at it at all. A lot of value. We know they hit on a lot of their late round picks, being last year's Virginia Kyle Williams, who showed up later and helped them forge their way into the playoffs. Now you have a double-edged sword with Blake Corum and Kyle Williams. They can do some things with those wide receivers they have, a healthy Matthew Stafford. The Rams are starting to look scary the more we go through this draft.
Yeah, and they had another third round pick, 99 overall, and they took safety Cameron Kitchens out of Miami, 11 interceptions over the past 2 seasons. So this guy is a ball hawk, not the fastest guy, but I think he really makes up for it with great awareness and good instincts.
Cameron Kitchens, solid pick. I mean, currently right now they have a 7th round from 2 years ago named Rush Sheet in the starting position. He's going to have an opportunity to play and play often.
In the 5th round, they took edge defender Brennan Jackson out of Washington State, another guy that I actually got to see live last year, outside linebacker at Washington State, big time pass rusher, disruptive player. He's got a knack for the football, 16 sacks, 83 quarterback pressures over the last 2 years. I love this pick in the 5th round.
Yeah, solid pick. Again, I was talking about the edge, and depends on what type of defense they run. You get a guy with a high motor that can make some things happen.
Now, they took a bunch of flyers in the 6th round, but at 209, they took kicker Joshua Carty out of Stanford. Now, the reason I bring this up, because I think he was the best kicker in this class, and he went after Will Reichard went from Alabama. So really interesting there, because not the first kicker off the board, but I think the best kicker in this draft. So I think that's great value there. My only issue here is I think they waited too long to address the offensive line. And I'm surprised that they didn't even draft a corner at all in this class. I thought they would at least take a flyer on a guy. But when you look at the class as a whole, a lot of really nice picks for LA. I'm going to give them a B- grade, Alex.
Yeah, I can pretty much agree with that. And you're absolutely right talking about the cornerback situation, because they did bring in Tre'Davious White. We know he's been injured and injured often. So you wanted to get some more depth there, especially with some youth. But nonetheless, the top half of this draft is really on point, and I think they're going to make an impact early. And we know what type of coach Sean McVay is. I'm going to give them a B+. Last but not least, out of the NFC West, a team that I was high on coming out, but the Arizona Cardinals, really good towards the end of the year, and now is really looking at the draft to see what they could do. Obviously, with that first pick, number 4 overall, Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think there's much to say. I think everybody's been pumped full of Marvin Harrison juice, being whose son he is and his size and what he's done at Ohio State over the past 2 seasons. I don't think there's much to be said about him. This was a home run pick. It wasn't too hard. Most of us, probably 90% of us football fans, could have made this pick in our sleep.
Yeah, this is the one guy that I felt like on every single mock draft they had penciled into the 4th pick. This was a no-brainer, a guy with a big-time ceiling and a really high floor, because I think he's going to be an instant impact guy day one.
They had 2 picks in the first round, and they go and they get Darius Robinson. A lot of people who had him a first to second round pick, they go into the back end of the first round and get Darius Robinson. I like this pick. The Cardinals are moving more to a 4-2-5, which has a lot of 3-4 principles. You put Darius Robinson on the edge there as a rusher. And remember, they have a lot of young guys there in BJ Ojolari, Zaven Collins. So they're going to be able to get multiple and rotate a lot of those pass rushers around. So love that pick. They're addressing the defense, something they haven't done in a while.
Yeah, Darius Robinson is a guy that I got really excited about after the Senior Bowl because he really dominated against the top players over at the Senior Bowl. I think that got him in the discussion to be a round one type of player. Then he had kind of a poor showing at the combine. And that made me kind of wonder if maybe we're a little too high on this guy. But I trust tape more than I do measurables. So overall, I like the Darius Robinson pick a lot.
Right, and I saw that on our YouTube pick, some people were talking about the Tyler Guyton pick, and if you want to know why I feel that way, go take a look at the Senior Bowl and what Darius Robinson did to him, but I digress. Second round, they come back and get Max Melton. I love this guy, as a Northeast guy myself, love him coming out of Rutgers. Day one starter. They needed to address the secondary. The only person back there is Budda Baker, home run pick.
Yeah, another guy that made my top sleepers article that I put out before the draft. Absolutely love Max Melton. The more tape I watched, the higher up my board I moved this guy. I think he's a day one starter and an impact guy, a guy who actually had a really good showing against now his new teammate, Marvin Harrison Jr., when they played against each other in the Big Ten. He also played really well against Roman Wilson from Michigan. So this guy had some really good tape against some of the better receivers in that conference.
Coming back in the third round, they had 3 third-round picks. The first pick, Trey Benson, love him, was number 1 running back on my board. I had a second-round grade on him, but we know in a depressed running back market, he got pushed to the third. Love that pick. Going to be a running back of the future. They also then went on to pick offensive tackle Isaiah Adams, who I believe is probably going to end up being a guard in this league. And then they also got Tip Riemann, a tight end. I had issues with both of those picks. Their offensive line is not the best. And I thought they had an opportunity in the third round with the 2 other third round picks, Cooper Beebe, Zach Zinter, Christian Haynes, all better than Isaiah Adams. With the third round pick, Roman Wilson, Jalen McMillan, and also Peyton Wilson were available. We know that this entire wide receiver core has been depleted. And when you have Jalen McMillan there and you also have Roman Wilson there, I think the value is too much to leave on the board when your wide receiver room is Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, and Greg Dortch, who none of you are drafting them on your fantasy team. They had an opportunity here to improve this team and help Kyler Murray, who I think might be turning the corner, and they neglected to do so here.
Yeah, love the Trey Benson pick. One of the best running backs in this class, no doubt. A guy that can really get north and south, but has the ability to bounce runs and get on the edge and make big plays. I think that's just a great pick. And when you look at those first 4 picks, I think they hit home runs on all these guys. But then the middle of this draft, like you alluded to, Alex, gets a little dicey. Those 3 third-rounders, I think, are big misses because you just ran through a bunch of names. There was way too many good players on the board that they missed on here.
Yeah, and then they come back. We'll just talk about the 4th through the 7th round picks. Obviously, in the 4th round, they got Daedreon Taylor Demerson, and then in the 5th round, they came back and got an edge rusher in Xavier Thomas. Coming back in that 4th round, you can't draft a player like that with the value of Kyrie Jackson. Again, address the back end of that defense. Also, Javon Baker was available, another wide receiver. And then that name again, TJ Tampa. And then in the 5th round, going and getting Xavier Thomas, another edge rusher. However, when Cedric Granger from Georgia was available to address the offensive line, something you did not do. And also another name you've heard me mention before, Muhammad Cameron, was available again. I just think the value was too high on these guys for the other people that they drafted, so they missed again for my taste.
I'm not going to go through them all, Alex, because I agree with you. This was a couple more players that I think were reaches. The one player late in this draft that I really like, that I think they found some really good value on, was their 5th round pick, Christian Jones, the offensive tackle out of Texas. I think that could end up being a steal. I was surprised he fell that far.
So overall, because they missed so much during the middle of this draft, where I think is the meat and bones of the draft, and we talked about what was available between wide receiver and offensive tackle, and they just simply chose wrong here. I have to bump them down to a C+. Still high on the team, but this draft is a C+. There's just simply too many misses here in terms of value for me.
You know, Alex, I'm going to push back on that a little, just because, for the simple reason, I really, really like those first 4 picks. And when you've got a draft where your first 4 picks, I think, are all home runs, it's hard for me to knock the rest of the draft too harshly. And I do like Christian Jones late. Like I mentioned, I think there's some value there. But you're right. Once you get past the first 4, there's a lot of question marks on why they went in the direction they went. I'm going to go B here. I'm a little higher on this class because, like I said, I'm going to put a little more weight on the front end, but I'm with you. They had a ton of picks, especially in those mid and late rounds, and I feel like they missed on a lot of golden opportunities.
You know what? First time in probably PGF history, you changed my mind, Brad. You're right. Those first 4 picks were home runs, so that should boost them up more. You're absolutely right. I'll have to move them up to a B- at best.
If you enjoy the podcast, do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Only 1 draft grade episode left. And then, guys, we're going to move into the off-season storylines. But once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.
Zencastr is the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. It provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content, all from one dashboard. Zencastr's post-production process takes the headache out of audio production. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. Coordinating all your guests to record in person is painful and tedious. Easily invite up to 11 participants per recording with one click. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code PGFP, and you'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.